The ship of Ambassador Zixtal entered Earth's orbit on a clear Tuesday morning. The vessel was smooth and silver, like a teardrop frozen in space. This was humanity's first official meeting with the Galactic Concordat, a union of 27 alien species from across the Milky Way. Captain Susan Miller stood straight in her blue uniform on the landing pad. Next to her, Lieutenant Daniel Wright checked the welcome gifts one last time. They represented Earth's newly formed United Earth Space Command, created just 5 years after humans discovered faster-than-light travel. "Are you nervous?" Daniel asked, his voice low. Susan gave a small smile. "A little, but mostly excited. We've waited so long for this." The alien ship landed without a sound. There was no burst of engines, no rush of wind. One moment it was floating, the next it rested on the pad, as if it had always been there. A door opened in the smooth hull. Ambassador Zixtal stepped out, and both humans tried not to stare. The alien stood on 4 thin legs. Its body was long and covered in short blue fur that seemed to shift color when it moved. It had 6 eyes arranged in a circle around what must be its head, and 4 arms ending in hands with 7 fingers each. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," Susan said, stepping forward with her hand extended, as they had been told was acceptable. Zixtal hesitated. All 6 eyes blinked at different times. The alien reached out one hand very slowly and barely touched Susan's fingers. "Thank you for your welcome," Zixtal said. Its voice came from a small device on what seemed to be its chest. "I am honored to be the first representative of the Concordat to officially visit your world." Daniel stepped forward with the welcome gifts. "These are tokens from our world. This is water from our deepest ocean, seeds from our oldest tree, and a data crystal containing music from 100 different human cultures." Zixtal took the gifts with 2 of its hands. The other 2 hands stayed close to its body, most thoughtful. The Concordat appreciates these symbols. Susan noticed something odd. The ambassador seemed to be keeping its distance. Its legs were positioned to allow for quick movement away from them. Was the alien afraid? "Please, follow us to the reception area," Susan said. "Earth's leaders are eager to meet you." They walked across the landing pad toward a large glass building. Other humans waited inside, diplomats and scientists chosen to represent Earth. Everyone had been prepared for this moment for months. As they entered the building, a server approached with drinks. The tray held water for the humans, and a special liquid prepared based on information the Concordat had sent ahead about Zixtal's species. The server stumbled slightly on the smooth floor. The tray tilted. Susan moved quickly, catching the edge of the tray. A glass broke and fell, slicing across her palm. "I'm so sorry, Captain," the server said, looking horrified. Susan waved it away with her uninjured hand. "It's nothing, just a small cut." Blood dripped from her palm onto the white floor. Daniel quickly handed her a cloth from his pocket. Susan pressed it against the cut, smiling reassuringly at the ambassador. "Just a minor accident. Please, don't worry." But Zixtal had backed away several steps. All 6 eyes were fixed on Susan's hand. The alien's blue fur had darkened to almost purple. "You are injured," Zixtal said. The translation device couldn't hide the strange tone in its voice. Susan wrapped the cloth around her hand. "It's nothing serious. We humans heal quickly from small injuries like this." Zixtal's eyes blinked rapidly. "Yes, humans have many unusual abilities." There was something in the way the ambassador said this that made both Susan and Daniel look at each other. It wasn't just the words. It was the way Zixtal's body seemed tense, ready to flee. What did the alien know about humans that made it so nervous? Susan smiled and gestured toward the reception hall. "Shall we continue? There's much to discuss about Earth joining the Concordat." Zixtal followed, but kept a careful distance from the humans. Its eyes never stopped watching them. The meeting room was quiet after the others left. Only Susan, Daniel, and Ambassador Zixtal remained, sitting at a round table made of real wood. The public welcome was over. Now it was time for the private talks. Your leaders seem very eager to join the Concordat, Zixtel said. The alien's fur had returned to its normal blue color, but its 6 eyes still watched the humans closely. Yes, Susan replied. We've been alone in space for so long. The chance to learn from other species, to trade and share knowledge. It's what we've hoped for since we first looked up at the stars. Zixtel's upper arms made a gesture that might have been discomfort. You speak as if your isolation was accidental. Daniel leaned forward. What do you mean, Ambassador? The alien was silent for a moment. Its fingers tapped against the table in a quick rhythm. I must be direct with you. There is something unusual about your application to join the Concordat. Most species are invited after they are observed for several centuries. Humans have barely left their solar system, yet there was immediate interest when you achieved faster-than-light travel. Susan and Daniel exchanged glances. Is that a problem? Susan asked. Not exactly. But in the ancient records of several Concordat species, there are mentions of Earth. Your world was listed as quarantine zone. Daniel's eyes widened. Quarantine. For how long? At least 50,000 of your years, Zixtel said. Long before human civilization as you know it. Why? Susan asked, her voice calm but firm. Were we seen as dangerous? Zixtel's fur rippled, changing slightly in color. Yes and no. Your species has a unique trait, one that makes many other species nervous. The alien touched a device on its arm. A hologram appeared above the table, showing what looked like brain scans. One was labeled as human. Others with names Susan and Daniel didn't recognize. Most intelligent species in our galaxy follow one of 2 patterns, Zixtel explained. Some, like my people, are always logical. Our emotions are mild. We never lose control. Others are ruled by their emotions and have limited logical abilities when feelings are strong. Susan nodded slowly. And humans? Humans are different. You can experience extreme emotions while still maintaining logical function. You call it controlled rage or focused anger. You can be furious and yet make complex decisions. You can be terrified and still plan effectively. Daniel frowned. That doesn't sound so strange to us. It is unique in all the galaxy, Zixtel said, and potentially frightening. There is an old saying among the elder species of the Concordat, gods help you when humans lose control. It was thought better to leave your kind alone until you matured further. Yet here you are now, Susan said. What changed? Zixtel's top right hand made a gesture like a shrug. Some believe humans have balanced this trait with your moral development. Others think it is better to have you as allies than to risk you developing on your own. The room was quiet as the 2 humans took in this information. So, Daniel said finally, we're being invited in because some of your people are afraid of us. Not exactly afraid, Zixtel said. Cautious, respectful. Like one respects a storm or a fire. Useful but potentially dangerous. Susan's face showed no emotion, but her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. I see. And what do you think, Ambassador? Are we dangerous? All 6 of Zixtel's eyes focused on her face. I think your kind has great potential for both creation and destruction. Which path you choose matters greatly to the galaxy. Before Susan could respond, an alarm began to sound. The lights in the room flashed red. Daniel jumped to his feet. That's the emergency alert. The door slid open. A security officer ran in, face pale with fear. Captain Miller, the station is under attack. The space station shook as Susan, Daniel, and Zixtel ran through the corridor. Red lights flashed along the walls. A voice spoke over the speakers, calm but urgent. All personnel evacuate to emergency shuttles. Hostile forces have breached Docking Bay 3. This is not a drill. Susan touched the communication device on her wrist. Miller to command. What's our situation? A voice crackled back. Captain, we have 5 enemy ships. They've deployed boarding parties. They're calling themselves the Purity Vanguard. Zixtal's fur turned almost white. The Purity Vanguard. Here. You know them? Daniel asked as they turned a corner. Extremists, Zixtal said. They believe the Concordat should not accept new species, that the galaxy was better when each race stayed in its own territory. Another explosion rocked the station. The lights went out for 3 seconds before emergency power kicked in. We need to get to the main shuttle bay, Susan said. Ambassador, stay between us. They hurried down the hallway. Ahead, they saw a group of humans running toward the escape pods. Susan recognized several members of the Earth diplomatic team. Then she saw one fall, hit by a beam of blue light from behind. Take cover, Susan shouted, pulling Zixtal into a side corridor. Daniel followed, drawing his sidearm. From their hiding spot, they watched as 4 aliens entered the main corridor. They walked on 2 legs, but had long, thin bodies covered in gray plates like armor. Each carried what was clearly a weapon. Purity Vanguard soldiers, Zixtal whispered, all 6 eyes wide with fear. The invaders fired again. Another human diplomat fell. Susan started to move, but Daniel held her back. There are too many, he whispered. We can't help them now. Susan's face hardened, but she nodded. They needed to find another way out. This way, she said, pointing down the side corridor. If we can reach Service Tunnel B, we might be able to circle around to the secondary shuttle bay. As they moved deeper into the station, they met Sergeant Alan Foster and 2 security officers. Alan was a big man with a serious face who had been assigned to the diplomatic mission as head of security. Captain Miller, he said with relief, we've been looking for you. Most of the diplomats made it to the shuttles, but communications are down in half the station. What about Earth Command? Do they know what's happening? Susan asked. Alan shook his head. The attackers are jamming long-range communications. We're on our own. One of the security officers, a young woman named Kelly, looked nervously at Zixtal. Why are they doing this? Is it because of, us joining the Concordat? Yes, Zixtal said. The Purity Vanguard believes new species upset the balance of power. They think humans should be left isolated. A noise from behind made them all turn. Alan signaled for silence and peered around the corner. He pulled back quickly. 6 Vanguard soldiers, he whispered. They're searching the rooms one by one. We need to move, Susan said, if we can reach a shuttle. Alan shook his head. The path to both shuttle bays is blocked now. But I know a place we can hide until help arrives. There's a secure storage area 1 level down. It has reinforced doors. They moved quickly and quietly through the station. Twice they had to hide as Vanguard patrols passed by. As they reached a junction, they heard voices ahead. The group pressed against the wall in the shadows. 2 Vanguard soldiers appeared, dragging something between them. Susan's eyes widened as she realized it was a Concordat official, one who had been with Zixtal during the welcome ceremony. We have 3 of their delegates now, one soldier said. The commander wants them all for questioning. What about the main one? The ambassador to the humans. Still missing. Keep searching. The commander says we need him alive. The soldiers passed by without noticing the humans and Zixtal hiding in the darkness. When they were gone, Daniel looked at Susan. They're hunting for the ambassador, he whispered. Susan nodded, her face grim. Which means we need to keep him safe at all costs. They found a small storage room on the lower level. Alan secured the door while Susan checked for other exits. Daniel helped Zixtal sit down on a metal container. The alien's blue fur had turned pale, almost gray. Are you injured, Ambassador? Daniel asked. Zixtal's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. No, just processing. The Purity Vanguard has never been this bold before. They must have planned this attack for months. Susan rejoined the group. There's another exit through the maintenance tunnels. It could get us to the communication center if we're careful. Kelly, one of the security officers, spoke up. Captain, standard protocol in this situation is to evacuate all Earth personnel. We're not supposed to get involved in Concordat internal conflicts. This isn't just their conflict anymore, Susan replied. They killed Earth diplomats. They attacked our station. But we can't fight them, the other security officer said. There are too many, and they have better weapons. Alan checked his sidearm. We could try to reach the emergency beacons. If we can activate one, Earth Command would send help. Susan was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she looked at Zixtal. They're hunting for you specifically. Why? The alien's fingers twitched nervously. And one of the strongest supporters of humans joining the Concordat. The Vanguard sees me as a traitor to the old ways. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. So what do? Hide and wait for rescue. Try to escape. Fight back. Everyone looked at Susan. As the highest-ranking officer present, the decision was hers. She walked slowly around the small room, considering their options. By now, some of the shuttles must have reached Earth. Help will come, but it could take hours. The Vanguard might be gone by then, taking their prisoners with them. She stopped and looked at each person in turn, including the ambassador. Helen nodded. If they get away with attacking us and kidnapping a Concordat official, it sends a bad message. But what can we do? Kelly asked. There are only 5 of us, and one is a civilian. Susan's eyes had a strange look now. Daniel had seen it before, during crisis situations. It was calm, focused, intense. She wasn't panicking. She was thinking more clearly than ever. We're going to rescue the other Concordat delegates, she said. Everyone stared at her. That's against protocol, Kelly said. We're supposed to protect Earth citizens first. Protocol doesn't cover this situation, Susan replied. This is first contact. Everything we do now sets a precedent for how humans will be seen in the galaxy. Daniel stepped forward. I agree with the captain. We can't just run away. Zixtal was watching them with all 6 eyes wide. You would risk your lives for Concordat delegates you barely know. Susan looked at the alien. Yes, because it's the right thing to do. Alan checked his weapon again. I'm with you, Captain. But we need a plan. The Vanguard outnumbers us and has better technology. Then we'll have to be smarter, Susan said. Daniel, you studied the station schematics. Where would they likely hold prisoners? Daniel thought for a moment. The security office on level 3 has holding cells. It's also near their entry point at Docking Bay 3. Susan nodded. Good. Alan, what weapons do we have? 5 standard sidearms, 2 stun grenades, and whatever we can improvise. Susan turned to Zixtal. Ambassador, we need information. What are the Vanguard's weaknesses? Any vulnerabilities in their armor or technology? The alien seemed stunned by what was happening. You are actually planning to attack them, with just 5 humans. 4 humans, Susan corrected. You're staying here where it's safe. But the odds are... We know the odds, Susan interrupted. Her voice was calm, but had a hard edge that made Zixtal fall silent. Now their weaknesses. As Zixtal began explaining, Daniel watched his captain. Her anger was visible in the tightness around her eyes, in the way she held her shoulders. But it wasn't making her reckless. If anything, she seemed sharper, more focused. Daniel suddenly understood what Zixtal had meant earlier. Humans really could use their emotions to make them stronger while still thinking clearly. And the Purity Vanguard was about to learn why that was dangerous. The humans moved silently through the maintenance tunnels. Susan led the way with Daniel behind her. Alan and Kelly followed with the other security officer, Pete, bringing up the rear. They had left Zixtal hidden in the storage room, promising to return. According to the station maps, they were now directly below the security office, where the Vanguard likely held their prisoners. Susan held up her hand, signaling the others to stop. Above them, they could hear voices. I can make out 2 different speakers, she whispered. Maybe 3. Daniel nodded. The access panel should be just ahead. It will put us in the supply closet next to the main office. Susan checked her weapon one last time. Remember the plan. Quick and quiet. Alan, you and Kelly take the left side. Daniel and I will go right. Pete, you watch the door. Everyone nodded. Their faces were serious but calm. On my signal, Susan said, moving toward the access panel. She counted down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. They burst into the room above, catching the Vanguard soldiers by surprise. There were 4 aliens in the security office. 2 were guarding 3 Concordat delegates who were bound to chairs. The other 2 were working at the station's computer systems. The humans fired their weapons. Blue stun beams hit one guard immediately. The other guards reached for their weapons, but they were too slow. Within seconds, all 4 Vanguard soldiers lay unconscious on the floor. Clear, Alan called out. Susan hurried to the Concordat delegates. One was injured, with a dark purple fluid leaking from its head. The other 2 appeared unharmed but frightened. We're here to help, Susan said as she worked to untie them. Ambassador Zixfel sent us. One of the delegates, a tall being with shimmering green scales, stared at her. Humans, you came for us. Of course, Daniel said, helping another delegate stand. We couldn't leave you here. The green-scaled delegate seemed confused. But this is not your conflict. Alan was checking the corridor outside. Captain, we need to move. I heard something. Susan nodded. Can all of you walk? The delegates confirmed they could move, though the injured one would need support. They were just heading for the door when it burst open. 5 Vanguard soldiers rushed in, weapons raised. Down, Susan shouted. Everyone dropped to the floor as energy beams crisscrossed the room. Pete fired back, hitting one attacker, but then took a blast to his shoulder. He fell with a cry of pain. Pete, Kelly shouted, crawling toward him. Another beam hit near Kelly's head. Alan pulled her back behind a desk. We're trapped, Daniel said, taking cover behind an overturned table. Susan looked around quickly, assessing their situation. The Vanguard soldiers were blocking the only exit. They had nowhere to run. Surrender now, one of the Vanguard called out. You cannot escape. Susan caught Daniel's eye and nodded toward the stun grenades on his belt. He understood immediately. She then signaled to Alan, pointing at the delegates, then at the maintenance tunnel access. Alan nodded. Susan took a deep breath. We surrender, she called out. Don't shoot. She slowly stood up, hands raised. The Vanguard soldiers kept their weapons aimed at her. All of you, stand up, their leader ordered. As Daniel began to rise, he slipped a stun grenade across the floor. It rolled silently toward the Vanguard soldiers. Now, Susan shouted. Everyone covered their eyes just as the grenade exploded in a blinding flash. The Vanguard soldiers staggered, temporarily blinded. Susan and Alan immediately attacked, tackling 2 of the soldiers. Daniel grabbed another, wrestling its weapon away. But one soldier recovered quickly. It aimed its weapon at Daniel's back. Susan saw it happen as if in slow motion. Without thinking, she threw herself at the soldier, knocking its aim off. The beam hit the ceiling instead. She struck the alien with all her strength, again and again. Something changed in Susan in that moment. Her movements became faster, more precise. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made even the Vanguard soldier back away. Daniel had never seen anyone move like that. It wasn't wild rage. It was something more controlled, more frightening. Susan fought with a cold efficiency that seemed almost inhuman. Within moments, all 5 Vanguard soldiers were unconscious or disabled. Is everyone all right? Susan asked, her voice perfectly calm despite what had just happened. The Concordat delegates were staring at her with expressions of shock and fear. What? Susan asked. The green-scaled delegate spoke in a whisper. Now I understand the old warnings about humans. They moved as quickly as possible through the station corridors. Susan and Daniel supported Pete, who was badly injured but still conscious. Alan led the way with his weapon ready. Kelly helped the injured delegate while the other two Concordat officials followed close behind. "We need to get back to Zixtal," Susan said, "then find a way off this station." They turned a corner and froze. Ahead of them, a group of 8 Vanguard soldiers blocked the path to the maintenance tunnels. There was no way to reach Zixtal without going through them. "Back," Susan whispered. "There's another way around." They retreated quietly, taking a different corridor. But as they reached a junction, they heard footsteps approaching from that direction too. "They're searching all the corridors," Alan said. "They must have called for backup." Daniel looked around quickly. "In here," he said, pointing to a door marked Engineering Control. They hurried inside, closing the door behind them. The room was filled with screens and control panels that monitored the station's power systems. Susan helped Pete into a chair. His face was pale, and the wound on his shoulder still bled. "How is he?" Daniel asked. "I'll live," Pete said through gritted teeth, "but I won't be much help in a fight." The green-scaled delegate approached Susan. "Your rescue was brave, but perhaps unwise. Now we are all trapped." "We're not done yet," Susan replied. She turned to Daniel. "Can we use any of these systems?" Daniel examined the control panels. "Maybe. This controls power distribution throughout the station. We could create a diversion." "Do it," Susan ordered. She turned to Alan. "How many Vanguard do you think are on the station now?" "Based on what we've seen, at least 20, maybe 30. One of the Concordat delegates, a being with 4 arms and a body covered in what looked like smooth stones, spoke up. "The main Vanguard ship docked at Bay 3. If we could reach it, we might escape." "That's on the other side of the station," Kelly said. "We'd never make it." Susan was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We don't need to reach their ship. We just need to reach the communication center. If we can send a distress signal, Earth forces will respond." Alan pointed to a station map on one of the screens. "The main communication center is here, 2 levels up, but it's likely heavily guarded." "What about the emergency beacon?" Kelly asked. "There's one in the maintenance hub on this level." Daniel nodded. "That could work. It's designed to activate automatically in case of station damage, but we could trigger it manually." Susan made her decision. "That's our target. We get to the maintenance hub, activate the beacon, and then find somewhere defensible to wait for rescue." Pete struggled to sit up straighter. "What about Ambassador Zixtal? We can't leave him." "We won't," Susan said. "The maintenance hub is closer to the storage room where we left him. We'll get him on the way." Daniel finished working at the control panel. "I've set up a power fluctuation in sections 12 through 15. When I activate it, those areas will go dark for about 2 minutes before the backup systems kick in. That should draw some of them away from our path," Susan said. "Good work." The stone-covered delegate watched them with what seemed like fascination. "You humans adapt quickly to crisis." "We've had practice," Alan replied. Susan checked her weapon. "Everyone ready? When the lights go out in those sections, we move." Daniel pressed the final controls. On the screens, they could see parts of the station losing power. Alarms began to sound. "Now," Susan said, opening the door. They moved swiftly through the corridors, taking advantage of the confusion. They encountered 2 Vanguard soldiers and quickly overcame them. As they approached the storage room where they had left Zixtal, they heard sounds of a struggle inside. Susan signaled for everyone to take positions. She counted down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. They burst through the door to find Ambassador Zixtal fighting against 2 Vanguard soldiers. The ambassador was pinned against the wall, his blue fur now dark with what must be blood. Without hesitation, Susan and Alan fired their weapons. 1 Vanguard soldier fell immediately. The other turned and fired back, missing Susan but hitting the wall behind her. Daniel rushed forward and tackled the remaining soldier. They struggled briefly before Alan's second shot rendered the alien unconscious. Susan hurried to Zixtal. "Ambassador, are you hurt?" The alien's 6 eyes blinked slowly. "Not seriously. They found me only moments ago." "We've rescued the other delegates," Susan told him. "Now we're going to activate the emergency beacon to call for help." Zixtal studied the humans with all 6 eyes. "You actually succeeded." "So far," Susan said, "but we're not safe yet. Can you walk?" The ambassador nodded. "Yes. He was interrupted by a loud explosion from somewhere in the station. The floor shook beneath them. "What was that?" Kelly asked. Alan checked the corridor outside. His face was grim when he returned. "They're coming," he said. "A lot of them." They could hear the vanguard soldiers approaching from both directions in the corridor outside. There was no way to reach the maintenance hub now. "Into the service tunnels," Susan ordered. "We'll try to circle around them." They helped Pete and the injured delegate into the tunnel access in the floor of the storage room. The others followed quickly. Alan was the last one in, closing the hatch behind him. The tunnel was narrow and dark. They moved as fast as they could, guided by the small lights on their communication devices. After several minutes of crawling through tight spaces, they reached a junction. "Which way?" Kelly whispered. Daniel checked the small map on his device. "The maintenance hub should be." "Wait." He frowned at the screen. "I'm detecting a lot of movement there. They must have guessed our plan." "Is there another emergency beacon?" Susan asked. "Yes, in the auxiliary control room," Daniel replied. "But it's 3 levels up, near the command center. It would be heavily guarded." Susan thought for a moment. "What about the shuttle bays? Could we reach one of them?" Alan shook his head. "The vanguard will have them all secured by now." Zixtal, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "There is one other option. The vanguard ship." Everyone looked at the ambassador. "You said it's docked at Bay 3, Susan said. "That's where they entered the station." "Yes," Zixtal replied. "But they would not expect us to head toward their own ship." "For good reason," Alan said. "It would be suicide." Daniel's eyes lit up with understanding. "Not if we don't try to steal it. We just need to use its communication system to send a distress signal." Susan nodded slowly. "That could work. The vanguard ship would have powerful communications, impossible to jam. And they might have left it with minimal guards, since they're all searching for us," Kelly added. It was risky, but they had no better options. They changed direction, moving through the tunnels toward docking Bay 3. They encountered no one, but twice had to stop and hide as they heard vanguard soldiers walking on the deck above them. Finally, they reached the access panel that would bring them out near docking Bay 3. Susan peered through a small gap first, checking for guards. "I see 2 at the main entrance to the bay," she whispered. "There might be more inside." Alan checked his weapon. "We don't have many shots left." Susan looked at their group. Pete could barely stand. The injured delegate wasn't much better. They were running out of time and options. "We need a distraction," she said, "something to draw those guards away from the door." Daniel studied the tunnel junction they were in. "These service tunnels connect to the environmental systems. If I can access the controls, I might be able to trigger a fire alarm in another section." "Do it," Susan said. While Daniel worked on the tunnel controls, Susan turned to Zixtal. "Ambassador, I need to ask you something. The vanguard, how will they respond if they corner us? Will they take prisoners?" All 6 of Zixtal's eyes fixed on her face. "They will take me and the other delegates alive. For humans, I cannot be certain." Susan's face hardened. "I understand." She gathered everyone close. "Listen carefully. Once we get inside the bay, Daniel and I will head for the ship to send the distress signal. Alan, you and Kelly protect the delegates and Pete near the door. If anything goes wrong, if we don't make it back, surrender if you can. Keep the delegates safe." Alan looked like he wanted to argue. but he nodded. Daniel returned. Alarm set. It should go off in 30 seconds. They waited in silence. Then, from somewhere in the station, alarms began to blare. Through the gap in the access panel, Susan saw the two guards look at each other. One spoke into a communication device, then both ran off toward the source of the alarm. "Now," Susan said, pushing open the panel. They emerged quickly and moved toward the docking bay doors. Alan helped Pete while Kelly supported the injured delegate. They reached the doors without being seen. Susan looked at Daniel. "Ready?" Something in her voice made Sixtel stare at her. There was a calmness in her face that seemed almost unnatural given their situation. Daniel nodded. "Ready." "Remember," Susan said to the others, "whatever happens, keep the delegate safe." She entered a code on the door panel. As the doors slid open, they saw the Vanguard ship inside, and 5 armed soldiers standing guard around it. The soldiers spotted them immediately, raising their weapons. "You might want to look away," Susan whispered to Sixtel. Then something changed in Susan and Daniel. Their faces became eerily calm, their movements suddenly precise and fluid. They moved forward together, not rushing, but with a purpose that made even the armed soldiers hesitate. 2 months later, Sixtel stood before the Concordat Council. The Grand Chamber was filled with representatives from all 27 member species. At the back of the room, Susan and Daniel sat quietly, watching. They wore the formal uniforms of Earth's Space Command, now decorated with new medals. "Ambassador Sixtel," said the council leader, a tall being with glowing blue skin, "please present your final assessment of humanity's application to join the Concordat." Sixtel stepped forward. His blue fur was healthy again, showing no signs of the injuries from the space station attack. "Honored Council," Sixtel began, "I come before you today to reverse my initial assessment. I now believe humans must be included in the Concordat, not because they are safe, but precisely because they are dangerous." A murmur ran through the chamber. Susan and Daniel exchanged glances. "Explain," the council leader said. "During the Purity Vanguard attack, I witnessed firsthand what the ancient texts meant by their warnings about humans," Sixtel said. "When those 5 Vanguard soldiers confronted us in the docking bay, Captain Miller and Lieutenant Wright did not panic. They did not rage blindly. Instead, they entered a state of focused action that I can only describe as terrifying in its efficiency." Sixtel turned to look at Susan and Daniel before continuing. The two of them disabled all 5 soldiers within moments. Their movements were precise, their decisions immediate and correct. They secured the ship, sent the distress signal, and ensured the safety of all Concordat delegates before Earth forces arrived. The council leader leaned forward. "You speak of their combat abilities. Is this reason to welcome them, or to fear them?" "Both," Sixtel replied honestly. "But consider this. When the humans defeated the Vanguard forces, they took prisoners. They provided medical care to injured enemies. When Earth command ships arrived, they turned those prisoners over for proper trial rather than seeking revenge for their dead diplomats." Another council member spoke up. "The Purity Vanguard has attacked our diplomatic missions 3 times in the past year. This is the first time they have been defeated." "Exactly," Sixtel said. "Humans possess qualities no other species in the Concordat has. They can channel their emotions into action without losing rational thought. This makes them unpredictable to enemies, but their strong moral codes direct this ability toward protection rather than conquest." Sixtel's 6 eyes swept the chamber. "I was afraid of humans when I first arrived on Earth. I believed the ancient warnings. Now I understand those warnings were incomplete. Yes, humans are dangerous when they lose control, but they are most dangerous when they are protecting others." The chamber was silent as council members considered his words. "What is your recommendation, Ambassador?" the council leader asked finally. "I recommend humanity not just for membership, but for special status as peacekeepers," Sixtel said firmly. "I witnessed what the ancient texts meant. Gods help you when humans lose control, but gods help you even more if those humans consider you under their protection. The vote that followed was unanimous. Earth would join the Concordat. Susan and Daniel were called forward to stand with Zixtal as the council leader made the announcement official. Later, at the celebration, Zixtal approached Susan as she stood by a window, looking out at the stars. "Captain Miller," the ambassador said, "I must thank you again for saving my life." Susan smiled. "You don't need to keep thanking me, Ambassador." "Perhaps not," Zixtal replied. "But I am curious about something. When you faced those soldiers in the docking bay, knowing you were outnumbered, were you afraid?" Susan thought for a moment. "Yes," she said finally. "I was afraid we would fail. That the delegates would be killed or taken. That Earth's first real contact with the galaxy would end in tragedy. Yet you acted despite that fear," Zixtal said. Susan nodded. "Sometimes we act because of our fear, not in spite of it. Fear for others can make humans stronger." Zixtal was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The galaxy will be different with humans in it. Is that good or bad?" Susan asked. "Neither. Both. But certainly more interesting," the ambassador replied. "And perhaps safer for those who call you friend." Susan smiled as Daniel joined them, carrying drinks. The stars outside seemed brighter somehow, full of new possibilities.